Okay, good afternoon, everyone. And I want to welcome the officials from the Central Tenders Board, the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Public Administration and Communications, the Public Service Academy, the Controller of Accounts, Public Management Consulting Division, and the Auditor General, the members of the media, and the members of the public to this public meeting. The Committee on Public Administration and Appropriations has a mandate to consider and report to the House on A, the budgetary expenditure of government agencies to ensure that expenditure is embarked upon in accordance with parliamentary approval. B, the budgetary expenditure of government agencies as it occurs and keeps Parliament informed of how the budget allocation is being implemented. And C, the administration of government agencies to determine hindrances to their efficiency and to make recommendations to the government for improvement of public administration. The purpose of this 9th public meeting of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee for the 11th Parliament is to continue the examination of systems of inventory control in the public service. At the committee's previous hearing, an inquiry commenced into the budgetary expenditure of various ministries and departments for the financial year 2017, with the committee focusing its examination on the system of inventory control within the following ministries and departments: Service Commission Department, Ministry of Agriculture, Lands and Fisheries, Ministry of National Security, Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs, Integrity Commission, and the Office of the Parliament. From the previous hearing, issues such as inventory control management, legal barriers for implementation of an effective inventory control, procurement and disposal of assets, training, safeguarding of assets, and staffing arose. The committee hopes that today's hearing with officials from the Auditor General's Department, the Ministry of Finance, Service Commission Department, Public Service Commission, Central Tenders Board, Public Management Consultancy Division, and Public Service Academy will be fruitful and provide workable solutions to improve the system of inventory control within the public service. I wish to advise that this meeting is being held in public and is being broadcast live on the Parliament's Channel 11, Radio 105.5 FM, and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. Viewers and listeners can send their comments related to today's inquiry via email to parl101@ttparliament.org. I now invite representatives from the various offices and departments to introduce themselves, and after the members of the committee will introduce themselves. So maybe we can start on my left with the Auditor General's Department.
I am Majid Ali, Auditor General of Trinidad and Tobago.
Hi, good day. I am Ms. Laurelie Pujadas, Deputy Auditor General.
Good day, Gary Peters, Assistant Auditor General.
Jennifer Khan, Acting Director of Contracts at the Central Tenders Board.
Good afternoon, Mrs. Joan Mendez, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Public Administration and Communications.
Good afternoon. I am Denise Phillip, Acting Director, Public Management, Public Service Academy.
Good afternoon. I am Catherine Laban, Controller of Accounts.
Good afternoon. Vishnu Danpal, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Finance.
Good afternoon. Savitri Balkaran, Acting Director, Public Management Consulting Division.
Good afternoon. Maureen Manchuk, Chairman of the Public Service Commission.
Good afternoon. Veronica Cree, Director of Personnel Administration.
Good afternoon. Fana Rampal, Auditor 1, Service Commissions Department.
Good afternoon. Mrs. Parvati and Mulsing Mahabir, Deputy Chair, Public Service Commission.
Good afternoon. Alicia Wellington, Public Management Consultant 3, Acting Public Management Consultant Division.
Good afternoon. Michelle Durham Kisoon, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Finance, acting.
Good afternoon. Savitri Sipasad, Acting Deputy Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Finance.
Good afternoon. Karen Sibaran Timothy, Deputy Controller of Accounts, Treasury Division.
Good afternoon. Ajodia Ratan Singh, Human Resource Advisor, Public Service Academy, Ministry of Public Administration and Communication.
Good afternoon. Kurt Meyer, Acting Deputy Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Public Administration and Communications.
Good afternoon. Shamli Singh Ramdial, Acting Deputy Director of Contracts, Central Tenders Board.
Thank you very much. And the members of the committee, starting on my extreme right.
Good afternoon. Nicola Olivier, member.
Good afternoon. Ayana Webster Roy, member.
Good afternoon. Daniel Duki, member.
Afternoon. Lakram Bodo, Deputy Chairman.
Good evening. My name is Wade Mark, member.
Good afternoon. Alison Bash, member.
And I am Bridget Anisette George, Chairman. And I know some of you all have been before us before, but I think this conversation is a bit different. And therefore, I would really like to invite Mr. Ali, Auditor General, to begin our conversation today. Now, as we said before, we had interviewed several ministries on the last meeting, public meeting we had held. And we'd found that there were varying views on the procedures and practices of inventory control. So I think it would be very helpful if we invite you to sort of start off the conversation, to give us some sort of insight of the requirements that are necessary to be undertaken by the ministries and the departments with regard to inventory control.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Madam Chairperson, every year we conduct the audit of the accounts of ministries and departments. We perform an interim audit, a final audit. During the interim phase, we review the system of internal control to determine compliance with legislation and financial directives. Section 9(2)(d) of the Exchequer and Audit Act states that the Auditor General shall satisfy himself that essential records are maintained and that rules and procedures framed and applied are sufficient to safeguard the control of stores and other state properties. Safeguarding of state properties to ensure efficient and effective service delivery is the main aim of inventory control. Proper maintenance of inventory records and tagging of items in accordance with financial regulation stores are a crucial element of this function. Over a 5-year period from 2011 to 2015, approximately $1.8 billion was spent on minor equipment purchases under recurrent expenditure. During our examination of inventory control at ministries and departments, common observations were noted. Items not tagged, items not entered in the inventory register, items inventory register not produced. In relation to proper inventory control and management, from the receipt and tagging of certain items of government property to the overall safeguarding of this property, there are adequate rules to govern these issues. These rules are provided in the Financial Regulation Stores, the Exchequer and Audit Act, the Financial Regulation made under the Act, and the Financial Instruction 1965. The Central Tenders Board Act and Regulation also add to the existing regulatory framework in this regard and provide legal parameters for the proper disposal of surplus or unserviceable stores. You see, it is not that the rules and regulations are not there. The rules are there. The recurring problem is that the rules are not adhered to in too many instances for one reason or another. A good way of solving this problem and we see it from the external audit point of view, is having a functioning internal audit unit in each ministry and department. There continues to be the need for the establishment and maintenance of properly functioning internal audit units through government ministries and departments, as the Office of the Auditor General has been calling for the past 20 years or so. A properly functioning internal audit unit would ensure that these problems are addressed at their source, that is within the ministry and department and division themselves. That way, they would cease to be a forever recurring theme in the Auditor General's report. I thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I just want to ask you, following from your statement, in terms of, you said that there's adequate rules and regulations, and you mentioned tagging.
Yeah. In
our discussion with several of the ministries and departments, we'd found varied systems of tagging. Some are manual, some are done by some sort of mechanical means. Is there a preferred method or system of tagging?
No, well, I suppose in this day and age, an electronic procedure would be fine. Maybe GPS to keep track of your equipment and purchases that you purchase. So I think that will be suitably fine if you want to go in modern time.
Okay, so that will comply with your financial regulations stores?
Yes, that at least it's tagged and you know where it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Might I also ask another issue we've come across, again, in looking at the various ministries and departments, in terms of keeping their inventory register. Many seem to complain that your requirement is that it must be paper-based, and the regulations prohibit them from employing some sort of electronic register. Although we've found other entities who have mechanical and electronic systems, which they say have satisfied you. So could you give some clarification on that, please?
I just want to say that I don't think the regulations actually speak that prohibit electronic. I think the regulations require that a certain format, I think the Appendix 1, which is Treasury, normally sends out defines what is supposed to be in an inventory register, so that your format would have a certain heading. You know, it'd have articles, additions, removals, that sort of thing. I think what happens is in terms of an audit trail, many times if something is fully automated and there is no documentation, it's sometimes hard to follow from an audit trail purpose. So all we really need to do is be able to marry the electronic system with a way in which we can verify the data on that system and match it with the original invoices and other things. So I think that is really where the misnomer came into being.
So any sort of instruction discussion with respect to how you marry the audit trail with the electronic system of inventory control?
Well, I just want to say that, first of all, there is no standard at present. So we cannot begin to have a discussion on marrying when there is not a standard across the board. So I think I would want to defer to the Controller of Accounts in this regard, because the responsibility, it is not an Auditor General's responsibility, but the responsibility is vested in the Treasury, under which the Controller of Accounts has the remit.
Thank you. Controller of Accounts.
As the Deputy Auditor General said, we haven't really looked at electronic means as well as, she said, marrying what it is that, how they can conduct the audit with that as yet. So I really can't speak to that part of the conversation.
Are there any plans to look at it, and how soon?
Well, we will be looking at an automated inventory system, but that will come when we look at there's an integrated financial management information system, the IFMIS, that the government is looking to acquire as part of our public sector reform. And in that, there are modules for inventory management, which would include a fixed asset module and a purchase management module, and those will be fully computerized, electronic.
Okay, and just Ms. Laban, to maybe assist all of us in understanding, my recollection is that if Ms. has been coming for some time,
yes,
I might want to say 25 years, but I might be incorrect. So, and do you have an idea of how soon?
Well, it is closer now because in December last year, the government signed a loan with the IDB to continue that project. So they would, the loan is to strengthen the public financial management system of government. And yes, we do have a coordinator and a unit, and they have embarked on the project. But initially, it will take between 3 to 5 years.
All right, so 3 to 5 years from 2017. Since there are no rules that prohibit the electronic system, can anything be done in the interim between now and the next 3 to 5 years?
Good afternoon, Chair and members. The Ministry of Public Administration and Communications is at this time engaging with iGov in terms of undertaking a needs assessment and developing such a system, which will be an asset management system. Talks have started with the ministry, and iGov will be consulting with both Ministry of Finance, Comptroller of Accounts, as well as Auditor General. So we are in that sort of stage of developing an asset management system for the public service.
Yeah, but you know, we all understand this, and we understand it takes time. We're just trying to see, since that some of the ministries are saying that there is a rule, which we now understand that that rule has been, let's say for best case, been misinterpreted. Is there any guidance for the purposes of improving inventory control that amongst yourself, Control of Accounts, and your ministry, that you can give to ministry so that they can upgrade their inventory register and inventory control systems? That will be consistent with what is the required practice, but also take into account technological change and improve the system while we work on the new systems to come.
Well, certainly we are starting at our home ministry, Ministry of Public Administration and Communications, where we are developing. Since I assume only 3 months ago, we are looking at some policy development regarding asset management and procurement. We do have a system that allows for a computerized system that allows for our IT equipment. I can ask my Deputy Permanent Secretary to elaborate on that, but we are starting within the ministry, and when we have really fully implemented, we can use as guide and help the other ministries in the interim until we get the full IFMIS system operationalized.
But just let me ask, while we continue conversation, who takes the lead in being able to standardize some practice?
I think because the legislation is coming under the Exchequer and Audit Act and the financial regulations, that particular piece of legislation is vested with the Treasury, and therefore the ownership of that legislation is with the Treasury. I would also want to say for low-hanging fruits, it is while we speak of automation, which is obviously the way to go, because In our own department, we have begun to automate the inventory system as well. But as you understand what is happening, everybody is doing their own individual automation to try and make their work more efficient. But low-hanging fruits, I think the first call and the first step is that ministries and departments should be reminded, because there is a format that exists, although it may be, that they should be reminded by way of a circular simply that please have your records in this format so that at least you can know what is added in, what is added out, what is your balance, what is removed. It is not, something difficult. That, so for low-hanging fruit, be it manual, be it automated, but at least some sort of standardization by way of a circular of some sort that says we expect that your records be maintained in this way. And then as auditors, we can come in now and say with the authority that the controller of accounts has by circular number so-and-so dictated that your record should be in this format. And that could be a first step in sort of moving towards that. And that will also facilitate automation later down on the road.
Thank you, Member Mark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. May I ask, arising out of your intervention, Deputy Auditor General, I get from what you have said that the Comptroller of Accounts is the agency that ought to be establishing and having circulated to all ministries and departments a circular that can probably standardize the kind of formatting that would be required so that there would be a certain degree of uniformity across the public service. Even if you use automated devices or strategies to improve your efficiencies and or combine same with manual. What I want to ask the Comptroller of Accounts, if that is so, what is preventing the Comptroller of Accounts from issuing a standardized circular to all ministries to ensure that there is a common template that all can follow until the integrated financial management system takes root within 3 to 5 years, as you outlined? What is preventing that circular, standardized circular, from being issued?
Nothing is preventing us from issuing a circular. I will say that none has been issued within recent times, but what we do at the Treasury, what we do undertake, we do regular yearly annual Board of Survey on stores at ministries, whereby we check their, according to financial instructions 237 to 241, we do check their stores and their stocks and do reports to the permanent secretaries as well. We also, as part of our core responsibility to monitor the accounting systems and procedures of ministries, we also, when we go to the ministries, as part of our checks, we check their ledgers to ensure that a proper ledger is being maintained. And in those surveys, we would inform the ministries that this is a particular format that would be done, would happen. So it's not like we haven't been doing anything. We have been doing it in going out to the surveys, to the ministries and departments, and also the annual boards of surveys.
No, Madam Chair, we have been told by the Auditor General a short while ago that for some 20 years, in his various reports on the accounts for the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, he has observed, and it is reported in these various reports, that there is a breakdown in the internal auditing function as an example. And what we have emerging is different ministries competing to improve efficiency in terms of delivery of services and safeguarding public assets. But there is still to come into existence a standardized format, a common template, so that all ministries, all government agencies, all departments would have a common appreciation of what is required. So when the Auditor General is doing his work on behalf of the country, there would be a common template that all ministries would follow. What I'm asking, I understand what you have just said about what you have been doing through the Board of Surveys. It seems that that is okay, but it seems to be inadequate. Could you tell this committee when the Comptroller of Accounts would be able to implement and effect a standardized template that would be issued to all ministries, all government agencies and departments, so we can begin bringing about some degree of conformity and standardization in how we do the people's business in terms of expenditure and revenue. I think that is what we are looking for. Could you tell us when such a circular, or whether there are difficulties in issuing that circular? Why that circular has not been issued?
Thank you. Controller of Accounts, yes, Minister of
Chairman,
Finance.
if I may, I will discuss, I take what Senator Marcus said, and I will discuss it with the Comptroller. There's nothing to stop us from distributing such a circular. I will discuss with the Minister of Finance, and with his authorization, we will proceed.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to find out from the Auditor General. In your statement, you indicated some $1.8 billion, if my memory serves me correct, between 2011 and 2015 from minor equipment purchases under recurrent.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, and if I recall in one of your reports for that same period, in terms of accounting for monies spent on the IDF and so on, for acquiring equipment and so on, you said of the requests made of, I think it would have been 51 accounting officers, you only got responses from 11. 40 didn't respond. I would like to know if there is an independent mechanism, whether in your department or any department, which could verify what would be the asset base of the various ministries and departments. And related to that, therefore, what I'm really asking is if there is an independent system to track an item from the moment of its acquisition to the moment of its disposal.
Well, ma'am, at the moment, there is no tracking system like that in place. And it will be a huge task to sit and come up with a figure for the total assets, as you said, under the IDF. Because, as you said, we got responses from 11 out of the 51. So
having identified that difficulty, and I think it's because of non-compliance or non-responsiveness to your requests.
yes.
Is there a role for the permanent secretary of any ministry with respect to these issues you would have identified?
Well, the accounting officer is the one responsible for accounting for all the assets that is under his purview. So they are the ones should be in charge of getting that task done.
And if I want to ask the PS Ministry of Finance, is there a role for the PS Ministry of Finance in these circumstances?
Yes, there is, Madam Chair, and I am guided by obviously by the Comptroller of Accounts, and the Comptroller of Accounts would usually take the lead and determine how the assets of the ministry are guarded. Let me just pass over to her, and she will explain, Madam Chair.
In terms of how assets are guarded, currently, well, you know, there are lock safes and drawers, lock safes and cabinets that we would, if you need to put in documents there, but in terms of guarding of assets, one of the measures that we have put in place is that no officer must leave the building with assets or equipment belonging to the ministry without a letter of authorization. So that is one of the things that we have in place currently. Additionally, there are cameras at different strategic locations within the ministry.
But really what I'm trying to find out is, if the Auditor General is saying to me that under the development program, from 11 responses, they know that there's inventory in the sum of about roughly $90 million, and 40 accounting officers have not responded. One, how is that dealt with so it's not repeated? Secondly, is there somewhere independent? Because if I do a rough maths, and it's really going to be a guesstimate, it means that doing a pro rata, the assets of the 51 has to be somewhere between 360 million and 360 million and 450 million. Is there anywhere in any of your departments that somebody can really put a quantum on this in the absence of permanent secretaries doing what they're supposed to do?
It would be difficult to put a quantum because a lot of ministries have not been maintaining their asset registers. However, what we can do out of the ministries who have not responded, part of our responsibility is to issue like a circular, bring them all in and issue a circular to encourage them to comply with the directives given.
And can I ask when last that was done?
We have never met with the accounting officers on inventory control.
Okay, so
within recent times.
Can I ask if, as a result of this exercise, some new order may arise?
Yes, we can. We would have to also issue a circular, but we also have to, we normally would call them in to discuss the issues.
So we haven't done a circular. Have we called them in to discuss the issues, and when last?
No, as I said, we have not within recent times discussed
inventory control at all. Okay, thank you. Member Mark? And then
I just wanted to ask, Madam Chair, what are the sanctions that would be applied to accounting officers who flout and refuse to provide critical information to the Auditor General Department in order for the Auditor General to carry out his constitutional duties in accordance with the Republican Constitution?
Well, there is, according to the Exchequer and Audit Act, Section 27, there is a power of surcharge by the minister. But that hasn't really been operated in a while. I'm not sure if there are any other sanctions apart from, because our authority lies within its compliance and actually giving directions to the accounting officers to them.
Given the circumstances that we are faced with as manifested in the reports of the Auditor General, could the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Finance indicate to this committee whether the time has not arrived for us to fundamentally review the Exchequer and Audit Act and related regulations to modernize those rules and regulations, including imposing appropriate sanctions against public officers who continue to breach the rules, the regulations, and the laws of the country? Could you indicate to us whether there is need for us, through your ministry, to review legislation to bring new measures in place whereby sanctions can be imposed on delinquent accounting officers who refuse to adhere to rules of the Auditor General?
Senator Mark, I agree with you fully. I believe that the Exchequer and Audit Act, as well as the financial regulations, are somewhat outdated. And even in the context of the new and impending Procurement Act, that these regulations should be updated to match modern times. I also believe that disciplinary action and sanctions, as you mentioned, should be taken against accounting officers if they don't comply.
Thank you. Might I take now Member Webster Roy, then Member Duki, and then Member Bodo? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Comptroller of Accounts, in your last response to the Chair, you said that inventory control was not discussed in a while. And on this public moment, I blitzed out why not? Because from examining different departments, you would have seen that it's a pervasive issue. Why wasn't priority given to maybe helping the departments to address that particular situation?
Although, as I said, it was not discussed in a while, it's also because we also do send out officers there, as I had mentioned before, and when they go to the ministries to do their audits, they would talk personally to the staff there, give them guidance on the format of the registers, and to ensure compliance. They do have it in the report to the permanent secretaries to make them aware that this is what is not happening at the ministries.
But the fact that the problems keep recurring, would it prompt you to then send out something in writing, calling all the permanent secretaries into account? Because it's not 1 year, it's not one ministry, it's across the board. We're seeing this issue coming up all the time. Would you give the undertaking now to ensure that it is given some level of priority?
PS Ministry of Finance.
Madam Chair, let me tell Minister Webster Roy that I will give the undertaking that we'll do this. And we'll also, the Board of Permanent Secretaries meet on a monthly basis, and we'll have that placed on the agenda for the next meeting.
Thank you. Member Duki.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. If I followed the Auditor General correctly, I believe he stated that there are sufficient rules and regulations regarding the function of tagging, but these rules and regulations oftentimes are not followed. Regarding that, what has been done or what can be done to improve that situation?
You know, we have been discussing this as an office as to what, because we are really just there to report, and we do not have the prima facie influence as does the Ministry of Finance or the Treasury. But as we move forward into the modernization process, I mean, I do believe that there should be some sort of tracking device that can be used to track at least the asset base, the large asset base of the various ministries and the departments, so that at any time we can know that if something has been, you know, unauthorized departure from the office. Of course, these things all require funding and costs, and I mean, given the situation that we seem to be in now, I don't know how that can play out. But there, you know, there needs to be a way of where things can be properly tracked so that its movements can be properly tracked. I take note what the controller has mentioned in terms of the authorization process, in terms of something must be authorized first. But a malfeasance does not necessarily take place in that manner. A malfeasance can take place whether or not an authorization process is in place or not. So there must be some method in which one can observe. I also agree with her in terms, because we have also implemented that we have now installed cameras in prime locations as to where a significant amount of our assets are located, so that we would be able to see if an asset is missing, that we would be able to see who has, you know, unauthorizedly taken use of that asset. So that, you know, there are small things that I think accounting officers and heads of departments could probably implement in the short term, while long-term solutions are sought. You know, so I think that's the only thing I was going to say, Ms. Daly. Is there anything extra you want to say?
Okay. Yes, ma'am. And generally, are there any consequences when these rules are not followed? Are there any consequences whatsoever?
Well, there are no surcharges in place when this breach takes place. So as such, we do our best to keep track of the high-priced assets to ensure they're with us.
Member Bodo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'm looking at the Auditor General's report for 2015, and I'm seeing that one of the issues here, one of the pervasive issues has been the issue of staffing and training. And if I may quote directly from the report, a number of accounting units are still reportedly understaffed, and I'm quoting directly again, an important entity such as the Treasury Division, which is responsible for the production of the public accounts and the training of officers in accounting procedures, was also reportedly under-resourced and so unable to provide the necessary level of training. I just want to open up the discussion in view of the fact that we have many of the key stakeholders here who are responsible for training in terms of how this issue, what is the extent of the problem, and how this issue can be addressed. Perhaps I can invite the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Finance, to lead off.
Thank you, Dr. Bodo. Madam Chair, if I may, through you, there's an issue as far as staffing is concerned. I don't want to make that as an excuse. That's a standard excuse used throughout all ministries. It's something that we are looking at the Treasury specifically, as far as the accounting units are concerned, and also the internal audit units. And something that we're going to look at and try to find a solution for in the shortest possible period of time. And I also want to ask the Comptroller to give you specifics on the Treasury Department.
Comptroller.
Currently, in terms of training, our financial management branch, part of their responsibility is to train ministries and departments. The officers, we do have a structure in place for a training unit, but there is no training officer. We haven't gotten any from the DPA, as well as the professionals, our professionally qualified staff are the ones who currently assist in the training, but we do not currently have the full complement of staff to undertake that.
So maybe somebody could lend some clarification. Is there a role for the Public Service Academy for training? And if there is, do the permanent secretaries or the controller of accounts play a role in sort of influencing the type of training, the type of programs that are offered?
Good afternoon again. Well, yes, the Public Service Academy is a division of the Ministry of Public Administration and Communications. Our mandate is to really train public officers so that they can perform their functions effectively. And in keeping with that mandate, in order to ensure that we are able to fulfill that mandate, one of the things that we do, we prepare a schedule of activities for an entire year. We usually tag our year based on the fiscal year from October to September, and there we have numerous courses. In terms of the discussion that is before us at this time, what we have been doing is, especially since 2015, we have mounted courses in accounting, in government accounting procedures. Previous to that, we did liaise with the Ministry of Finance in terms of resourcing or facilitating these programs. But I guess due to the paucity of resources, they weren't able to. So what we did, we contacted retired public officers who would have worked in the Ministry of Finance, the relevant divisions, and we have engaged them to do some of these programs. Since 2015, we have done an average of about 3 courses in accounting procedures in 2015, 3 in 2016, and again for this fiscal 2017, we again have scheduled 3. I don't think any came off as yet because we are experiencing some challenges in terms of finance, and because of that, we again trying to see if Ministry of Finance can help us. But based on what the comptroller is saying here, it could be a bit difficult. In fact, I just want to say that even though we do engage external providers to do this training, what we do is that we liaise with the Ministry of Finance, and they inform as to what are some of the areas we can focus on. Over the last year, they have even sent some of their senior officers to sit in the training as observers to ensure that what is being dispensed is really accurate and what is needed in the system.
Thank you. So we heard about accounting. Has there been any training module for inventory control?
Okay, well, not inventory control in terms of name. What we have been doing since 2012 has been a course called Inventory Management. There is some focus on inventory control, but the course is itself Inventory Management.
So inventory management has what kinds of modules?
Chair, just let me refer to my notes. So
Okay,
that I can...
and then you could also tell me the last time you had such a program.
Okay, we look at issues such as stores organization and controls, stores records and documentation, receipt and issues of stores, stock verification, losses and deficiencies, purchase systems and controls, purchase records and controls, the purchase cycle, so these are some of the main issues that...
So when last was such a program offered?
Actually, Chair, the last time we did it was October 2016.
Recent. So I'm going to pose this question to both the Auditor General and the Minister of Finance. The PS, Ministry of Finance. I really don't know which one really should answer. What was called out there by the director as the modules in the program, would that suffice for training of somebody to comply with the regulations, the financial regulations?
Chairman, I think it's quite comprehensive.
Okay, so that it means we've had a recent program. So therefore, how can a ministry come here and tell us that a handyman in the ministry is involved in inventory management?
I just want to add that the modules that they have called out is, in fact, basically inventory control is inventory management, number one. But you do have to recognize that different people would be responsible for different stores' items. So with respect to you saying that a handyman, while it may sound strange, he would be responsible for certain expendable items of stores that he is supposed to maintain. So then he is a request upon him to maintain some sort of records to show how many brushes he has, how many shovels have been. So in a sense, he is part of the inventory process. He may not be of the overall oversight function, but at each level, everybody has a responsibility in maintaining those particular records that have been assigned to them, those particular stores items that have been assigned to them.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that information to aid in the clarification. But in the particular scenario, that functionary was not involved at the level at which you're speaking. It came to a question of inadequate staffing. And therefore, I wanted to maybe ask the Public Service Commission, how do they deal with staffing? To give another example, another department indicated that there was a shortage for personnel to do inventory control. They made representations. An officer was assigned, and the officer was never released from the other department. How do those things occur? How are they rectified?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As Chair of the Public Service Commission, my mandate, the mandate of the Commission, is to do the final appointing, promoting discipline, etc. It is the function of the Service Commission's department to do all the background work that you spoke about. So I'm going to ask her to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Good afternoon, members and Chair. Chair, one of the problems that Service Commission Department has been experiencing, not only from the service as a department in the public service, is the requirements for some of these officers. The requirement, the store's attendant, for instance, is in range 8, and the requirement is a primary school leaving certificate. If in this day and age, when we advertise for 5 O-levels, we get persons with degrees, with certificates, with diplomas, everybody applying. We are still using a manual system. So when we advertise, for instance, sometimes when we had advertised for customs officers, 5 O-levels, we got over 5,000 applications in response. If we were to advertise for primary school leaving certificate, where there is a dearth of work at this point in time, my imagination, we wouldn't know how to physically deal with the response. Further, the store's clerk job spec right now at this point in time requires, which is in range 14, it requires 5 GCO levels. what happens is that persons are in line, persons who have been successful at the Clerk 1 exam, we would put them into the Clerk 1, and if we don't have enough officers, we may use the stores. Clerk 1 is the same range, 14. I'm using this as an example. But they're in line to our Clerk 2. And there has been movement going throughout the public service, and public officers have been looking from ministry to ministry, and even in their ministry, for every opportunity to move. So as one of the in-service commission, the problem I have as the accounting officer is as fast as you try to send someone to the training that public admin has, and you're telling yourself, my unit is now settling, and I have, persons are moving and moving and moving. And you do not have, when public admin runs a course, for instance, I think Denise and I stand corrected, a class would be, let's say, about 30 persons. I'm just using a rough figure. So service commission may get one person to attend. I'm just using an example. That person moves. You now have to train the next person because that person was in line to act, etc. There's a lot of movement in the public service. Yes, there is movement because, yes, there are vacancies, and as you fill a vacancy, you can create a vacancy. The storekeeper, who is a senior officer at the range of 24E, is in range 24E, and that officer is at the level of, 24E is at the level of a Clerk 3, which is also in 24E, is required to have 5 GCU level passes. Persons who, so a Clerk 1 or Clerk 2, will jump to go to act storekeeper because it is an opportunity to reach 24E. And if they're eligible to go to a Clerk 4 or whatever, everybody's looking to move because that is all, that is the reason. That is what persons are looking for, opportunities, they're looking for financial gains, etc. So I hear the issues that we are having. We also have, like, for instance, in service commission, I need a stores attendant. Like all ministries and departments, because we experience the same thing. Cabinet transferred that office in 2015 from one ministry to service commission's department. The officer has not been released to date, despite calls to the ministry, speaking, writing, etc. Because that ministry is saying that officer has specialized knowledge and they don't want to release that officer. So what you can do in accordance with the regulation is that you can look internal in accordance with Regulation 26 and put up someone to act. In Service Commissions Department, the only officers we have under Range 8, and it may be similar in all the ministries or department, is a cleaner. If you have a public officer who's a cleaner, but if you have a cleaning company, well, you can't use that. Or if you have maids who are in Range 4, you can utilize them. So you don't have a pool of persons that you can utilize the regulation to be able to also put a person's staff. So this is a perennial problem experienced throughout the public service. And that is one of the discussions I had with public admin in discussion. I remember speaking to Auditor General, etc. Because I kept saying, if the legislation is coming, and this is going to be a critical area, what are we going to do? Where are we going to get persons from? What are going to happen to these persons who are in these offices, etc.? So I'm very, I look forward to the responses and to hear how we are going to go forward coming out of this committee, the way forward of how to deal with some of these matters.
Thank you, Ms. Creed. I just want to hold a minute before we go into the legislation. But if I remember well, you said two things to me. In terms of one, there's a lot of movement.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems that ambition is really a dagger for us. But you also said, and my conclusion is, there are mechanisms to prevent movement. Because in your example with the stores clerk who was transferred by a cabinet note, who hasn't come as yet, it appears to me that there's a mechanism to block all of that movement. So if there is, I want to ask why it hasn't been employed more often. If there's not, then maybe somebody needs to explain to us how the stores clerk hasn't come to you. And thirdly, I want to ask is there a role for PMCD in all these vacancies? So if you can answer the first two, and then we'll shift to PMCD.
Well, we did the public service communication, writing to the PS, speaking to the HR unit, etc. We did an internal review also in the meantime, looking to see what offices we have that we could put someone to act. And we're in the process right now of asking someone if they're interested. But one of the problems the public service has been experiencing is the release of officers. And this is not only to do with stores clerks. That has been an issue because everyone, and I guess you could understand it, if you have persons who are working with you who have experience, etc., the commission can appoint people to act, the commission has promoted persons, but the releasing of officers at the end of the day is at the accounting officer's level.
But the accounting officers, if I remember something PS Finance said, they meet monthly or they meet regularly. Isn't this something that can be worked out within that body?
That is, I agree with the PS Finance because we just, that is something that could be brought to the floor to the attention at that forum. But that is something that really needs to be addressed because everyone is waiting on somebody else to release somebody else for somebody to come, and that is what has been happening.
And how many PSs we have here? 2. So I think very soon this issue could be realized.
Resolved, yeah.
And in terms of my, you finished, Ms. Creed, or you wanted to ask something else? Okay. In terms of my question to PMCD, what is the role of PMCD? Are they limited only to contract positions? Because we got the impression when we heard some of the ministries, it appears that they also have a role with the establishment. So maybe there could be some clarification. And if there are vacancies and there's the ability to fill it by contracts, where is PMCD in this?
Good day, Madam Chair. So the role of PMCD, I just want to clarify first. We deal with both established and contracts so that we are responsible for basically providing comments and reports to ministries and departments and cabinet on staffing issues so that we do organizational diagnosis and determine what is required by an organization for an organization and recommend accordingly. So that based on the issues being raised here, if it is that there are difficulties in filling vacant positions and the transfer and release of persons, the ministries can opt to create a contract position and have that more easily filled. So that the process for that would be that the ministry would, in accordance with Cabinet Minute 163, I believe of 2012, the ministry can do a draft note for Cabinet and outline the issues they're facing and that kind of thing, and the existing structure and the job description that they're proposing, and it should be sent to PMCD and we will do comments and then take it to Cabinet for the creation of the position.
Might I ask this? What is the time frame between the Cabinet note and the comments and the recommendations, average?
I could only speak for, okay, on average, I can't say, Madam Chair. The thing is that I would like to take this opportunity to say what we have been experiencing thus far. PMCD have standard processes and timeframes for the delivery of comments and reports. We also issued a checklist in, if I may get my notes, we issued a checklist in January 31st, 2012. All ministries were advised of a checklist for the requirements to include in their draft notes, which would assist PMCD in having all the information at hand to determine the proper recommendations. And it was again, a reminder was again sent in December 2016. So if I may say, some of the requirements in the checklist would be a concise statement of how the proposal links to the strategic objectives of the ministry, the current issues or challenges the proposal seeks to address, the solution options other than staffing which the ministry may have considered, the workload statistics, the list of projects or scope of work for the staff, the draft job descriptions, to name a few. The issue that PMCD have been having is that ministries have oftentimes disregarded the circulars and would be sending the draft notes without the required information. In that same circular, PMCD would have stated that we will close the assignment within 7 to 10 days or so if we don't receive the information. And that has been the case where we would be lenient and leave it open, and it would seem as though PMCD is taking long to respond, but really, in fact, we have been waiting for very long periods to get the information before we can prepare our comments.
I have one last question for you. It seems to me you have a mapping process, okay? If we were living in an ideal world and the PSs did what they were supposed to do, how long that procedure will take?
Okay. I would say a week max for the ministry to prepare the draft note, get the information, prepare the draft note, or given the, okay, it's the ideal world, so a week for the ministry, say, if it is the creation of positions, it would be, and we have PMCD received everything, it should not take us more than, say, 2 weeks to do the comments. And although in instances of when we...
Ideal world.
Ideal world. So I would say ideal world, it would take 1 week at the ministry, 1 week at PMCD, and then it will go back to the ministry for the ministry to take it to cabinet, another week, and that's it.
PS, Ministry of Finance. I guess that's another matter to put on the agenda, that it will take a maximum of 3 weeks if the PSs did precisely what was mapped out on that PMCD circular for their issues to be addressed. I'm sure this is very enlightening. Thank you. Member Bodo and then Member Olivier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to go back to the Public Service Academy, and I know you mentioned the process and so on, but just to give us an idea in terms of the training needs and what percentage roughly you're able to accomplish of the requests for the training.
Okay, we plan on an average of 110 different workshops, courses for a given fiscal. I just want to say that we know with the number of public officers out there, that's not enough. But we too, at the Academy, we too have staff constraints. We have, at this time, 5 human resource advisors and 3 PMAs, public management analysts, and these are really returning scholars. So we are really grooming them. Eventually, hopefully, they would become human resource advisors. But with this limited staff, to do what we would really like to do, of course, it's inadequate. However, we plan about 110 courses, and we are able to implement a maximum of 80% of all the courses that we planned. And many times, what hinders us is the lack of funding. What we have been doing, however, is that there has been a consultancy about 2 years ago, and it helped to build the capacity so that now some of the actual training is being done by the staff of the Academy.
Just a follow-up. So it's obviously a very ironical situation where you, as the body responsible for training, actually is experiencing challenges yourself. But I'm just trying to get an idea of, in terms of the numbers you would have trained in those, when you say 80%, and as a percentage of how many would require training.
Okay, but for an average course, we got about 20 to 24 participants. So I don't have the figures before me, but I can always provide that for you. But I just like to say that for an average course, as I say, 20 to 24 participants.
Member Olivier?
If you'd permit me to just go back with that conversation between the DPA and PMCD. Now, what PMCD offers via the contract position is an alternate to the pervasive problem, really, of being able to fill the establishment positions within the public service. So whilst we have discussed how we can make that alternate provision more efficient, we still really haven't landed on a workable solution for being able to solve the core problem, which is Service Commission being able to fill vacancies, and that is the core problem that really needs to be addressed. Now, if we have issues of permanent secretaries not releasing personnel, I suspect is because they're afraid if they release someone, they may not get a replacement. So we find ourselves in that vicious cycle that really leads us nowhere. So I think that what we really need to do is tackle that core problem. When an assignment is made, I mean, it should not be the permanent secretary's discretion to choose, well, I will not release this person because I want to hold on to this person. No one got a job in the public service that assigned them to a particular ministry in a particular position forever. And I don't accept the excuse of a large number of applicants being a deterrent for advertising a position. There are many vacant positions on the establishment out there that ministries would like to have filled. And while they're jumping through hoops to get the contract appointments fast-tracked, which in fact sometimes could take, at the very least, I'd say 3 months, we really should be focusing on addressing the real problems. So I'd certainly like to see some suggestions on how Service Commission can, well, firstly, seek to fill their own vacancies as a priority, because I know that the lack of permanent staff, established positions within Service Commission is hampering their work to begin with. So I'd certainly like to see Service Commission Department prioritize bringing themselves up to a full complement of staff, and then they'd be able to focus on addressing the issues of the rest of the public service.
Service Commission.
Chair, I didn't know if member wanted feedback, but I know I gave an example of advertisements. This does not mean that the Commission has not taken decisions to advertise offices on an ongoing basis. I was just using it as an example because we at Service Commission, we work in a paper-based environment. We have a staff of HR persons of about 45 to 50 persons to service the entire public service. The public service is over 30,000. The teaching service is over, I can't remember the statistics right now. We service judicial and we service the Police Service Commission. So one, we're working in a paper-based environment. Two, we have been trying to see if we could even assist ourselves by getting like online applications which would assist us. So we have been looking for solutions. Right now we are in discussions with IGOV to see if they could help us design something or get something done. So I'm not saying that advertisements would not take place. I totally agree, and I'm very happy for the point that you made, that we need to first see about Service Commission, get our staffing up, and we'll be able to move forward to even assist other persons. Thank you, Chair. Chair, if I may, one other point I wanted to make, aside from the movement of persons throughout the public service, one of the other issues that we have been experiencing and the Commission has been experiencing is that persons have not been accepting acting if it is not in a traveling office, And because some ministries may have one office that is traveling, another ministry that is not traveling, so they call around, they want to know if it is in south, if it is traveling, if it is east, if it is west, and then the commission has actually given approvals and people have been declining acting and promotions based on matters such as that.
Is that consistent with public service regulations?
Well, it is your option to accept an acting or to decline or accept or decline an acting or promotion. But when I say they don't call service commission because we wouldn't be in possession of the information of whether it's south or whether it is traveling. They call ministries and departments. They do their research. So we have had to do a lot of cancellations and things like that. It's not that action has not been taken, but sometimes because of the decline, we have to go back, cancel, look for somebody else, put up that person. And we have had instances in some offices where we have done 5 cancellations.
Thank you. Member Mark?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I wanted to ask a very simple question to the DPA and maybe the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Finance. To what extent would you say that the current classification and compensation system in the public service is contributing to the current challenges that is faced by the DPA and maybe the Permanent Secretary could advise us on that as well. I'm wondering if that is not a very big issue in the public service of the Republic of TNT today.
Chair, if I may, yes, we have had challenges because of the present compensation system and the classification system. We have even had a recent court judgment because, for instance, I'll use that as an example. The job specifications that are presently designed have a clause, an equivalent combination of experience and training. And in the past, over the years, the Service Commissions Department had applied the requirements for the office. And there was a recent court judgment in 2016 where the judge said that you needed to look at the equivalency clause. Now, I just indicated for one office, we may get over 5,000 applications. And to put your mind to screening applications for over 5,000 applications and looking to see if someone satisfies under the equivalency clause, you will understand how difficult it could be, but that is the guidelines that we are using. The other point I made too was that some of the present descriptions that we have may be outdated. The requirements, technology has come into being. For instance, the IT requirement from the job spec, if I remember correctly, is geography, maths, etc. And now you have IT degrees. So all of these things have to be taken into consideration, and it hampers us in having to screen. Even, as I said, whether the office in works could be traveling and the one in health may not be traveling, the officer don't want to go to health, they want to go to works. So there are a lot of issues that also impact on whether persons are interested, whether they take up jobs, and that is why they also delay, because public officers have a very good way of trying to delay to find out all this information so that they could decide whether I will take it or I will not take it. I'll pass you on to the PS. You wanted some feedback from the PS?
Madam Chair, through you, I agree with Senator Mark. The compensation packages are major deterrents to people seeking to enter the establishment positions. However, there's an anomaly in the system, and that is I've been approached by several members of staff who are in contract positions, who are willing to move to the establishment positions and to take the salary cut. That's the point. to take the salary cut to move to the establishment positions. And for some strange reason, and maybe the DPA could respond, they've not been successful.
Really interesting. I'd love to hear the DPA on that.
As a matter of fact, the commissioner had a discussion yesterday. There's a matter right now where someone took the Judicial and Legal Service Commission to court. And we're waiting on the outcome of that judgment. Because the regulation provides basically that you look inside, and if you don't have anybody, if you're unsuccessful, look outside. Or if you could determine that there is no one in the public service suitable, you could say, well, yes, on these grounds, we will go outside. For the generic positions and for certain positions, that's difficult for us to be able to do, sitting where we sit. So if a permanent secretary or head of department puts forward a strong justification as to why something should happen, whether it should go outside, in accordance with the regulation, that there is no suitable persons in the public service, etc., the commission will consider it, and the commission has considered it, and they have gone outside and advertised in and out at times. But it depends on what is submitted and placed before us to place before the commission.
So I'm still unclear, and it's just really for my clarification. How does the commission approach and take advantage of the opportunity that PS Dan Paul just referred to?
So when the office is advertised outside the public service, the contract persons could apply in that instance. So it is open to the general public.
Okay.
Anybody could apply.
So
when I said,
yes.
Two ways to advertise: in the public service or outside the public service. And as I indicated, the commission the commission has decided that that notice of vacancies be given outside. So advertisement of vacancies have occurred in offices outside. That gives contract officers and people who have worked an opportunity to send in applications. So we have both scenarios, in and out.
I'm trying to understand that there appears to be a contradiction. On the one hand, the government policy, as I understand it, is to phase out contract labor in the public service. That is what was enunciated. And to deal with tenure of security for workers, particularly in the public service. But at the same time, we are hearing from the PSMD that when vacancies arise or when you have to deal with new structures and you need to fill those positions, contract employment seems to be the way to go, and recommendations are made to that effect. So I wanted again to pose a question, Madam Chair, whether not only the compensation and classification, but the whole issue of a proper job evaluation, because this question of the stores that you just raised there, where in 2017, somebody who's in stores, given the modernization of the public service, given the technological advances that we have made, given where we want to go in the 21st century, a number of jobs in the system of the public service have become outdated, anachronistic, etc. And sometimes I'm wondering, Madam Chair, through the DPA and the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Finance, whether that in itself is not inhibiting the efficiency levels and the productivity levels within the public service. If you have square pegs in round hole, or you have jobs that are not properly weighed or weighted, whether that is not a challenge for what we are dealing with too, a proper job evaluation exercise. Now, we may not be able to deal with that today. I raised that in passing, Madam Chair. And
Member Mark, I think you may get a comment, so I'll just maybe ask maybe the chairman of the Public Service Commission.
Thank you, Chair. Well, several comments I would like to make. One, with respect to contract officers coming back into the service. There's a judgment based on a case that went before the court that said if you are working, you're a public officer, or somebody on contract, working in the public service is not a public officer. And therefore, if a circular with respect to an advertisement for a job that the person on contract is doing, and it's an internal circular, that person is not eligible to apply for the job. So that is one issue. What is not clear is the person who is on contract coming back to her substantive position and can't get it? So that I wasn't clear about what.
PS Finance?
Maybe I could clarify, Madam Chair. The person is not a public officer who's on leave for public purposes. This is a person who's on contract who's willing to move to the establishment.
Right. So that person has an advertisement to keep within the law. The post would have to be advertised inside and outside, and that person would have to compete like everybody else to get that position. The person who is occupying the position may have a better chance because that person is in the job, but it has to be on a competitive basis. You cannot just take the person and you're advertising it outside because the ruling says the person is not a public officer. So that is one issue. The other issues in Ms. Creed's intervention, and so with respect to promotion and what she was saying, this matter was discussed at the commission, and we have decided that the length of time some officers who have been promoted and they take so long to respond that we are going to promote and we are giving them a deadline. It's either you accept the promotion or you don't. If you don't respond, we continue to promote. And that is one way of dealing with this long delay, I think, so, which is what we're going to implement. The other issue, from what I'm hearing with respect to inventory control management, it seems to me two things. One, there's a lack of proper management within the divisions or departments by the supervisors and so who control inventory. So that is one thing that needs to be tightened up. Manage the inventory and the staff properly. The second thing is the lack of recognition that it is priority. If it were a priority issue, something would be done. It doesn't seem as the ministries have understood that it is important. It's government's money is being spent, and the assets have to be protected. So if those two little things are tightened up, we might see some better management of the system.
Thank you, Chairman, for your recommendation. I just wanted to go back for one moment. And in the Auditor General's report of 2015, and this is under Whitehall Restoration, paragraph 4.27, and I quote, as reported in the previous year, so that will be in 2014, and he's referring also to 2015, the current location of items of furniture, equipment, paintings, etc., which have been on the premises, which is Whitehall, before the start of the project could not be ascertained. I want to pose this to the Controller of Accounts. I got the impression from something you said earlier, is as if your department operates almost as a check and balance, as a sort of audit right? I remember you saying interim and final, I think the word is audits, are conducted by your department. In the light of those systems, if I understand it well, how come this could happen?
I think it was the auditor, Deputy Auditor General, who had first mentioned interim and final audit. But if you are speaking about the assets, we don't have the capacity to go out, and we don't audit machinery and equipment of ministries. Our mandate is normally on the accounting systems and procedures within the accounting unit, and that takes us mainly to the accounting units. In terms of assets, we look at the assets, the registers and ledgers, and those are what we look at to see if they are being properly maintained.
And I'll check the record, but if we misunderstood you, it means the checks that you all do is only with respect to the asset register.
Yes, and we do
So
spot
there's
checks
no
on the
verification
registers.
between what is on the register and what is on the ground?
Yes, we do spot checks on what is on the register
Yes.
to some of the items that are located in the
Okay,
register, but
so
it's only
would-
spot checks.
Would you have done spot checks in 2015?
Yes.
Yes. Would you, I guess you would have been familiar with the Auditor's General Report in 2014. So would it be reasonable if that had come to your attention, that that specific item would have come under a spot check?
Yeah, may have been.
Yes?
Yes, but I can't say whether we did check on that.
All right. But let me ask you something. You check, and let's assume you have checked. Then, having checked, if the items weren't there, what would be your next step?
If the items,
Weren't there, so you check the register, it's supposed to have furniture, equipment, and paintings. Because you know what was reported about 2014, you think it's reasonable in 2015 to include that specific thing in a spot check. You have done the spot check, you don't find the items. Is there a next step that you would take?
well, normally when we do our reports, it would be included in the management letter to the accounting officer and with recommendations. So those reports would go to the accounting officer.
All right, so it means that if you had done that in 2015, then there should be some report and response by the accounting officer. Yes?
Yes.
Okay, we in 2017, you would do spot checks in 2017? Can we get an undertaking that in 2017, if this still exists, that this will be included in a spot check?
Yes, of course.
Thank you. And I wanted to ask one thing from Service Commission. In terms of your statement with respect to a vacancy, if you are allowed to advertise in and out, and let's say somebody who are a contract officer and therefore qualified to advertise, contract officer, not advertise, to apply, sorry. The contract officer has applied, but a public servant has also applied. Is there a difference in the ranking?
When a public officer and someone external has applied, everyone is assessed the same. So if it is an external advertisement and a public officer decided to respond to it, we would not be looking at public service. We're looking at your qualifications, your experience, your competencies for the job.
Thank you very much. Member Bodo?
Thank you, Madam Chair. From the discussions we've had with previous entities, one of the issues that has come up is the issue of the disposal of unserviceable or obsolete items. And the point that was made over and over is that sometimes there is a delay in the disposal of these items. So if I can, through you, Madam Chair, perhaps that's the Director of Contracts here to, first of all, clarify the process and to indicate why sometimes it can be such a lengthy process for this to take place.
Good afternoon. In accordance with the CTB ordinance, sections 28 and 29, items that are government's property and have been originally bought at over $1,000, when they become surplus or unserviceable, they are supposed to be sent to the board with a report. This report is in the form of a Board of Survey report, and the Comptroller of Accounts appoints the Board of Survey. Once we have a completed application, it goes to the board with the recommendations of the Board of Survey. The board would then decide if to go with what the Board of Survey says, and I'll give an example. If the Board of Survey has recommended that we have vehicles and the vehicles be sold, and the vehicles are, say, fairly new, one of the officers at CTB would go to visit, maybe take photographs of the vehicles and come back and report to the board that this vehicle is in very good condition. The board then may decide that instead of putting this vehicle to be sold by public auction, it can be, we can have seal bids, invite seal bids. We might get a better price by inviting seal bids. The process does not take too long. I want to say that it all depends on the ministry sending their stuff to the Comptroller of Accounts to appoint a Board of Survey before it comes to the CTB.
Member Mark?
Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Finance. Given what the Auditor General has said and reflected in the various reports tabled in the Parliament, given what the Comptroller of Accounts have said, and given the fact that the Ministry of Finance is responsible for issuing letters and assigning persons to be accounting officers in the various ministries, could you share with us what measures have been taken to effect recommendations issued by the Auditor General on an annual basis to ensure that in the next Auditor General's report, those breaches and violations will not be repeated? The role of the Ministry of Finance in this regard. Could you explain?
Yes, Ministry of Finance.
The Auditor the Auditor General, presents recommendations to each ministry. They identify the issue and provide recommendations. The onus is on the accounting officer of each ministry to respond on how they intend to manage or respond to the recommendations as defined by the Auditor General. The Ministry of Finance, obviously, through and in this case, it will be Comptroller of Accounts in many instances, would have direct access to, like, for instance, inventory control, inventory management, asset management, to see how these ministries have responded to the recommendations of the Auditor General. But really and truly, the onus is on the accounting officer of each individual ministry to ensure that the recommendations have been complied.
Yeah, but seeing that the Ministry of Finance, and you must correct me if I'm wrong, actually appoints issue letters of appointment as it relates to an accounting officer. So you are made an accounting officer based on a letter issued by the Ministry of Finance. What I'm asking is that if there is delinquency on the part of those accounting officers in carrying out recommendations issued by the Auditor General, what are the powers within the Ministry of Finance to bring these delinquent accounting officers that you have appointed and you have issued letters to? What are the powers residing within the ministry to bring these accounting officers to book and to ensure that those events that occurred do not repeat themselves?
PS Ministry of Finance.
Yeah, just to clarify, the PS in the Ministry of Finance does not send out the letter. The Minister of Finance sends the letter. The ministry, as far as the regulations are concerned, the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Finance, as I said earlier, is guided by the Exchequer and Audit Act, guided by the financial regulations, and will take whatever actions are necessary based on the definitions within those pieces of regulations.
But might I ask it a different way? In terms of Member Mark is looking at, say, individual departments and default. If there are pervasive issues being identified by the Auditor General repeatedly, are there mechanisms, and they might have to be creative, that at the PS level, at your, I want to call it your board meeting of PSs, that these can't be tackled and some sort of way forward to prevent recurrence? We're not talking now about the individual ones with an individual recommendation, but pervasive issues.
At the level of the Ministry of Finance, I have had to call in several PSs before to explain to them the situation and how they should proceed and why it's necessary to abide by the recommendations of the Auditor General. I've also had the Minister of Finance do the same over the years.
Thank you. I just want to ask to the Central Tenders Board, does the Special Board of Survey reconcile items to be disposed with the inventory register of a department or ministry?
That part of it, Madam Speaker, is not done at the CTB. It's done at the relevant ministries. So I suppose when a Board of Survey goes out to a ministry, the items are listed for the Board of Survey to look at. So they should be, tally in there.
And therefore, Auditor General, is there evidence of this?
Yes, ma'am. Well, to tell you the truth, the Board of Survey takes a long time to get done. From my experience as accounting officer, we are in the process, maybe 10 years or more, waiting for a Board of Survey to be done. Right in the Ministry of Finance to get people appointed to come and have a look at our equipment. And it's against the OSH regulation now to have so much equipment, computer equipment, obsolete, packed up in our office.
PS Ministry of Finance, how is that?
Chairman, in defense of the Comptroller of Accounts, there are many ministries where they just keep the assets and the inventory in corridors, in storerooms, and they never tell the Comptroller of Accounts that there's a problem at the ministries. If there's a problem and there's a delay in the system, these PSs can write to me directly, and I will take measures to solve it.
So maybe there is need for a periodic, whether it's annually, I don't know, I don't want to say instruction, memo, I don't know what is the proper terminology, to go out to PSs, reminding them about the need to appoint a board of survey, disposal of obsolete assets and so on.
But Madam Chair, this is well documented in the public service.
Yeah, but if it is well documented, but it doesn't happen. I mean, I have seen lovely antique typewriters, which I'm sure have a value somewhere, being strewn all about the place in ministries, and I'm talking about typewriters, eh? I'm sure there are vehicles and that sort of thing. So while it might be documented, it means that somebody is not doing something. How do we deal with that?
Just want to clarify something. Ministries and departments, this is the process, and I will just briefly begin. Ministries and departments will prepare a list of unserviceable items, right? They will send it to their PS. The PS sends it to the controller of accounts, who is responsible for appointing the board of survey. Until that board of survey is appointed, those unserviceable items stay stacked in corridors, in storerooms, because the ministry can do nothing. Otherwise, they will be in breach of the regulations. So the responsibility for the appointment of the board of survey rests with the control of accounts under the remit of the Minister of Finance.
Okay. Can I ask when last a board of survey? So is an individual board of survey for every ministry? Okay, can I ask the control of accounts, let's say in the year 2016, how many boards of survey might have been appointed?
Okay, I can't say offhand how many, but I can say at least as far as in December, there were at least 2 special boards of surveys, one for vehicles and one for other equipment.
And that will cut across all ministries? Or it's with respect to a specific?
Yeah, for particular ministries who ask.
Who asked?
Yeah, who apply.
Who applied?
For the
So only 2 would have applied? Or of those who have applied, only 2 were appointed?
But I know.
No, I'm sorry. I think the only person who could really answer that is the controller of accounts.
I know of 2 in December, but there may have been others during the course of the year.
Okay. So could you therefore kindly supply us with a listing of the number of requests for 2016 by ministries and the numbers of requests which have been filled in respect of which ministries?
Okay.
Okay.
And might I say, one of our issues with the Board of Surveys is appointing the Board of Surveys and getting the relevant officers from the ministries. So as Ms. Buhadas has said, if we don't get the relevant officers, we can't continue on with the surveys.
So there's a problem in the appointment of the special boards
in
of survey?
getting persons from the various ministries to assist in the Board of Surveys.
So is that voluntary? Or there are specific posts that are identified to constitute the special boards of survey?
No specific post, but it depends on the nature of the item and the specialty, the nature of the items.
Okay, and I ask again, is it voluntary or is it a function of your post?
It's voluntary.
It is voluntary?
Well, we ask the ministries to appoint someone.
No, I understand that, but what I'm saying is, having asked the ministry to appoint the special board or the person there, would there be persons qualified so that if I were the maid, I couldn't qualify, and therefore I had to be above range, whatever? Or is it limited to a specific range? And therefore it's a function of your appointment, or is it at large? Yes, PS, fine.
Madam Chair, it's not limited to any particular range. It is at the discretion of the permanent secretary. The permanent secretary will appoint someone, an appropriate person as deemed necessary.
So could a contract officer be appointed? Yes? Okay, thank you. Member Duki.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Director of Contracts gave an example of what would influence a decision regarding whether or not to go for a seal bid or public auction regarding disposal of assets. What other factors would influence that decision?
It depends on the condition of, we are looking at vehicles. It would depend on the condition of the vehicle. So if, for example, we have a vehicle that is, we have seen in some ministries where you would have vehicles, very old vehicles, with grass growing out of them, and maybe just some rusting iron or something there. Now, if we come across something like that, the board will say, okay, these can be sold as scrap metal. So as I said, it depends on what is out there to be sold.
So primarily,
and the conditions.
Primarily, if I'm hearing you correctly, it is based on your perceived value of the asset.
Not our perceived value of the asset alone, and I'm dealing specifically here, I'm saying specifically here, I'm using vehicles as an example. We have Transport Commissioner, the Transport Commissioner would send a representative when we have vehicles to dispose of, and they as well would give something in writing to say whether the vehicles are roadworthy or not before we put them up for sale.
Could I go to training?
Are you finished, Member Duki?
On this particular matter.
Okay, Member Mark.
I have a series of questions on procurement, which I'll want to pose. But before I pose those questions, I wanted to ask the Permanent Secretary and the Comptroller of Accounts, having regard to what we have heard from the Auditor General, that for 10 years, that department has been waiting for a board of survey to be appointed to get rid of a number of unserviceable items. Could the Permanent Secretary and the Comptroller advise this committee when a board of survey will be appointed to assist the Auditor General in getting rid of those unserviceable items? As the first item on my agenda, I want to clarify.
Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Finance.
Madam Chair, tomorrow.
Thank you so much.
Very much. Madam Chairman, may I proceed to ask the distinguished Permanent Secretary, given what is expected as it relates to changes to the procurement arrangements in the public service, with the implementation of the Procurement Act on March the 31st, 2017, can you tell this committee whether the public service is ready for the implementation of this piece of legislation? Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Finance.
Madam Chair, through you. The Ministry, if I may preamble, the Ministry of Finance is of the view that this procurement legislation is one of the most important pieces of legislation to be implemented in our nation since independence. It's going to change the landscape in which we conduct business in Trinidad and Tobago. It's going to change the way in which government entities relate to suppliers. It's going to change the way in which suppliers relate to government entities. That being said, the Ministry of Finance is the executing agency, and whatever the level of proclamation that exists on March 31st, let me assure Senator Mark that the Ministry of Finance is going to be ready accordingly.
Madam Chair, through you, if the Permanent Secretary could give us an appreciation of the proposed structure, seeing that we are just 7 weeks away from the proclamation and operationalization of the legislation. Could you give us an appreciation of the proposed structure of the procurement units to be established throughout ministries and departments?
Madam Chair, through you, the Cabinet has approved the organizational structure and the job descriptions for the procurement units in each ministry, and they are based on, obviously, the size of the ministry, because some ministries are larger purchasers than other ministries. And Cabinet has already approved both the job descriptions and the organizational structure.
Can you make available to this committee specimens of these structures that have been approved so that we at this level can have an appreciation of those structures?
Madam Chair, through you, I'll have to seek the authorization of the Minister of Finance.
But I would ask you, P.S., in another way. When we interviewed some of the ministries, if we interviewed, say, 6, we found that 2 knew that there was a structure relevant to them and knew that there was cabinet approval. 4 didn't know. And that was 2 weeks ago. So that the question I want to ask is, has this been as yet communicated to the ministries? Who is responsible for the communication to the ministries? And who has oversight that the ministries are doing what they're supposed to do to be ready for the level of preparedness that the Ministry of Finance will have for whatever is required at the end of March 2017?
Just to let you know that, just to let you know that Cabinet, 2 weeks ago, we received the confirmed minute from Cabinet. Cabinet also approved the communication strategy to roll out the procurement legislation. We will be outlining the strategy for implementation of the procurement units to the permanent secretaries on the 16th of this month. All permanent secretaries will be there, and the Ministry of Finance will be outlining the strategy as we move forward.
Thank you.
Can I just raise a question? References is always being made in reference to the things being rolled out to the permanent secretaries. As you will know that there are a number of departments whose accounting officers are not permanent secretaries. So I would want to exalt the Ministry of Finance in terms of their rolling out, that it's all inclusive and it's across the board and it's not limited to the Board of Permanent Secretaries.
Actually, Madam Chair, I stand to be corrected. It's the Board of Permanent Secretaries and Directors and accounting officers. Yeah.
Thank you. What would be the impact of the procurement legislation on the existing Central Tenders Board?
Madam Chair, with the full proclamation of the Act, the Central Tenders Board would cease to exist.
And that would mean all the legislation that governs the Central Tenders Board.
Madam Chair, may I just follow up what you have asked? The Central Tenders Board would have employees. They would have personnel. Would these personnel be absorbed in the new structure that is going to be established under the legislation? What will happen to those employees or public officers who are currently employed at the Central Tenders Board? What is the
Ministry
plan?
of Finance.
Madam Chair, there are 3 options available to the staff of the Central Tenders Board. And just to let you know that our major priority would be our colleagues at the Central Tenders Board, as far as I'm concerned. Okay? The 3 options are a VSEP, secondly, the opportunity to be to join another ministry, to be within the public sector, public service, sorry. And the third option is to remain, to seek employment in the Office of the Procurement Regulation. No, but that also depends, sorry, Madam Chair, that will depend on, obviously, the procurement regulator, him or herself.
Member Bodo?
Sorry. Just to follow up on that, can you indicate how many employees would be affected when the Central Tenders Board is dissolved?
There are 52 employees at the Central Tenders Board.
Anybody else? Member Webster Roy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to go back to training, and this question is for the Public Service Academy. What training programs have been developed or are being developed or have been implemented to prepare the various departments for the proclamation?
Member, at the Academy, we really try to be proactive, and we are very much aware of the impending implementation of the legislation. And in that regard, we have done two things. We have partnered with the UNDP to conduct training in procurement. It's a level 2 program. Actually, there are 4 levels to this program. It commences with level 2, level 3, level 4. To progress to each stage, you must be successful. There is, for example, we had level 2 done 2 weeks ago. It's a 4-day program. Started the 27th, the 24th January to 27th. Level 2 was held. We collaborated with them. It's a certification program. At each level, participants are required to complete 100 multiple choice questions, 80% success rate to move on. And in addition, at each level, there is what we call a practicum. So at this point, we are still waiting to know those who would be able to move on to level 3. While we are at that, I want to say that in the case of Tobago, through the Tobago House of Assembly, the same level 2 program is, we got approval, so the week of March 18th, I'm sorry, I think it's March 21st, the week of March 21st, the same 4-day program would be held. However, I just want to say that we started these conversations with the UNDP group just late last year. And what they told us is that there were 105 public officers who were previously trained at the level 2. And they were trained, they came from, as we like to use the term, enterprise-wide, so from all ministries and departments were represented there. So in addition to the 20, we nominated 24 persons, 22 actually came. There are an additional 105 public officers who were trained at level 2. In parallel with that, the Public Service Academy has also mounted training in public procurement based on the impending legislation. And the first series of that starts next week. So let me just double check. Yes, actually, yes. February 13th to 16th. Right, this is the offerings of the Public Service Academy, and we are proposing to have this particular program. Once the first one has been conducted and we for checks, just make sure everything is good with it, we intend to roll this out every month until as long as it's required to ensure that public officers are exposed to the tenets of the new legislation and other general procurement guidelines.
Is it that you're aiming that all public officers will have some level of training, or
Yeah.
only particular groupings?
Okay, at this point in time, in the interim, we are looking to ensure that all public officers who are involved in procurement of goods and services are exposed. If subsequently that we need to, do different levels of training, we would. But I just want to say that the UNDP program that could satisfy that need, because the level 2 is a generic program, and that one it targets all persons involved in procurement. Level 3, it's geared towards those who are, but I see, we were told that there were some specific positions. So the level 3 would be like, I can't remember right, thank you, I'm being prompted. Yeah, senior procurement officer, and the level 4, I think, CPO, meaning chief procurement officer. So those programs are really being designed for those who are likely to.
Member Duki?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In keeping in alignment with training and the academy, in terms of your training interventions, how do you measure the effectiveness of those interventions? In other words, how do you know that the interventions that you are engaged in is leading to an improvement in the performance of officers?
Member, that remains one of our greatest challenges. And we are very aware that we need to do more in this regard. At this point, what we employ what is called the Kirkpatrick model, and we, at this point, more focus on level 1 and 2, which has to do with reaction, and we probably would give a pre-test and then a post-test to determine. But in terms of the impact in the organization as to how much change there is, this is something we have not really done much of. And one of the key challenges at this point is we are stymied by staff. And so because of this, we focus at this point on just the first part of the training cycle. So the part that comes to evaluation, this is something that we really want to embark on. It's a work in progress, and we are really looking at means to see how best we can.
So you're saying that there's need for improvement in that regard?
Pardon me?
So you're saying that there's need for improvement in that regard?
Yes, we are, and
Right.
we are seeking to work with the HR units to ensure that we can get feedback.
Okay, and I believe that you mentioned as well that there are times when you would engage external providers of training services. How do you go about sourcing them? What is the process or procedure?
Okay, well, previously we had expressions of interest, so we do have a database, and just last month, January, we sent out new expressions of interest to again update. So it's based on that information we get there through our database. We have a list of persons who are able to provide, training providers who are able to provide services.
So let's say, for example, you have a training need in inventory control, for example, and you're going to source a provider, and you have a number of organizations, training organizations on your list. What is the process from there?
Okay, well, what we do, we request proposals from 3 or more, a minimum of 3, let me say, a minimum of 3 providers. Then once those come in, we use a evaluation criteria, and the person or the training provider who scores the highest, 70% or more, the highest, that person is selected.
And after the training provider has delivered his or her intervention, how do you determine the effectiveness or the efficiency of that service?
Okay, well, we are staffed with human resource advisors who are skilled in human resource development. They are aware of what our objectives are. We would have done some training needs assessment to actually determine what is the content that particular program should contain or should comprise. And we also get feedback. We issue evaluation forms as well as to the participants. So it's a combination of the human resource advisor.
And the feedback from participants.
Pardon me?
And the feedback from participants.
Yes.
Thank you.
Member Mark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it is well established that the financial rules and regulations currently governing the system of public financial management essentially are outdated. Technology has seen to that. And we find that, as we have admitted, in many ministries and departments, there is, in fact, use of the electronic inventory control management system by several ministries, side by side with the manual accounting system. I would like to ask the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Finance and the Comptroller of Accounts, but more so, this one is to the Ministry of Finance. What interim measures would the ministry be introducing to update these outstanding or outdated, I should say, rules and regulations? And could the Comptroller of Accounts indicate to this committee once again whether it is the intention of the Comptroller of Accounts to introduce, as a matter of urgency, this standardized template that we were discussing earlier, so that there could be some uniformity throughout the public service on this inventory control system until we are able to bring into being within 3 to 5 years the integrated financial management system that you spoke about earlier. So maybe the Permanent Secretary can go first and the Comptroller after.
Madam Chair, as I specified earlier to Senator Mark, we will be discussing it with the Comptroller of Accounts, and we will be putting in place, as you suggested, it's a good suggestion, a standardized format throughout the public service.
See, we are concerned about a time frame because the public service is suffering severely, and we are seeing manifestation of that kind of bout of ailment in the reports. So we would like to know, through you, could you give this committee some time frame for the interim measures to see adjustment to these rules and regulations, please?
Madam Chair, through you, let me give the Senator a time frame before the end of March 2017.
Thank you. And I just want to ask one question to Madam DPA. Do you think GHRS could assist Service Commission with the flood of applications that come from time to time when you advertise for positions?
Chair, we are having discussions right now with GHRS. They have to look at their capacity to see if they can do it. They have to look at the software to see if the software can do the evaluation of the applications, especially in light of the requirements for the offices, where an office may have a lot of options, so you may have more options. So you have, for instance, entry into the administrative class, you have the certificate in public admin, you have the certificate in HR, you have the certificate in local government, etc. It has to be a software where you will have to now put in all the possible options. Plus, after that has finished, now you'll have to look at the equivalency clause to apply. So right now we are having discussions with them of what could happen, what can't happen, and we haven't reached a point in time when we could say yes, we could go ahead or we can't at this stage.
But do you have a sort of idea with respect to the length of time that these discussions are likely to take place? You know, in your mind, do you have a sort of outer limit?
I would like, at least by the end of March, that the committee that has been set up comes to some kind of decision, because although we are having that discussion with them, I'm still looking for any option that is available. So if any option comes our way, which makes life easy and we can go that way, we're looking at all options.
Thank you. And I assure you, this is the last question to the PS, Ministry of Finance. Very last. Earlier in the discussion, you had said to us that the financial rules and regulations you admit are outdated and needed to be upgraded. In the light of the new procurement legislation, would there be new rules and financial regulations, or would the existing ones still need to be upgraded?
Well, they will need to, the existing rules would need, and regulations would need to be updated to complement the new and modern, I must admit, Procurement Act.
In terms of that, if the legislation is going to really be proclaimed, to whatever extent, March 2017, how far has work progressed on these updating of the, because I'd expect that the legislation has to work in tandem with the rules. So how far has any work on this reached?
I can't say, Madam Chair, but it's something I'll bring to the attention of the Minister of Finance.
Okay, and therefore, I guess maybe this is part of the answer. What role would you have in that?
Of course, we'll have to inform the Cabinet, and the Cabinet, what the Cabinet decides will inform the CPC accordingly.
Thank you very much. I think that at this stage, we should bring the conversation to an end. I really would like to thank each of you all for a very stimulating and enlightening discussion. I want to be presumptuous enough to say that in this coming together of the various entities, I'm sure that you all have found solutions to some of your burning issues. I would like to throw out the invitation to each entity to give us some recommendations with respect to solutions that you would like to suggest to the issue that we have, the issues we have dealt here today. And therefore, I would want to say today is the 8th, so that if, having regard to the kind of month this is, if by the end of this month, that's a bad day, so let's say the 1st of March, if by the 1st of March we can get, your feedback with respect to recommendations, we would really welcome that. So I now suspend this meeting. I thank you all, and I wish you all a safe journey home. I thank the members of the listening public and the members of the media who've stayed with us and followed this discussion. Pleasant evening.